Welcome back, my friends. Silouan here. We've been going through The Road Less Traveled by the great Dr. Scott Peck. Last few episodes, we've kind of talked about depression, both sort of as the beginning of somebody recognizing my life isn't the way I want it, I want to change things, and kind of at the end, that the end result of depression coming out of it is recognizing I needed to make those changes, and that when I do, I'm kind of living in a new world. Now, the big question then becomes, what do you do between the beginning and the end? I mean, how do you go from feeling hopeless and depressed to having made changes in your life and being happy, and joyous and free, and realizing it was the depression that was the catalyst for making those changes? Well, as we go through this book, sometimes I'll go through it linearly, sometimes not. But the next concept I want to bring up that helps us understand how we get from here to there is the idea of love. It's the idea of love. Now, we tend to think of love as a feeling, but what's really interesting about love is that if you ask 6 people what love is, you might get 6 different definitions. Is the love, what is love? Is the love of a child the same thing as the love of a spouse? Is the love of a friend the same thing as the love of a girlfriend? What is that thing? As he begins to discuss this, he says, one result of the mysterious nature of love is that no one has ever, to my knowledge, arrived at a truly satisfactory definition of love. In an effort to explain it, therefore, love has been divided into various categories: eros, philia, agape, perfect love, imperfect love, and so on. Okay? That if you really start getting down to it, love isn't one word or one thing, as we might think of it. It's a bunch of different things. Maybe, but maybe not. Because he wants to dig deep, and he's talking about love because in many ways, understanding love is the secret to understanding, overcoming depression, or however you may be feeling, and truly living as we were meant to live. He goes on, I define love thus: the will, a decision to extend oneself, to grow, for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. Because you can love yourself. So love is the choice to grow in a way that cares for, improves your own self or another. That's love. Now, how you do it may be different. How you do it for yourself may be different than how you do it for a friend, may be different for how you do it for a lover, for how you do it for a child, for how you do it for someone you're volunteering to help someplace. But the action is the same under this definition, which I kind of like. Well, then he goes on to talk about how some people might not like that, which I will spare you. And then he gets to a little bit more layman's terms of that action, which I really like, okay? I therefore conclude that the desire to love is not love itself. So you're at a event and you see a pretty girl and you feel like you're in love with her. Is that love, or is that a desire to love? And is either one of them really love? Dr. Peck would say, no, it's not. He would say, I therefore conclude the desire to love is not love itself. Love is as love does. Love is an act of will, namely both an intention and an action. See, love is what you do. It's not a feeling. Think of how many examples you could think of people that would say they love someone and then treat them in the most horrible way. Every once in a while I'll meet someone and they'll be like, my parent never said to me they loved me. What I hear a lot more than that is, yeah, I had a parent that treated me horribly and told me they loved me. Okay? So was that feeling of love that horrible parent had love, or was that just emotion? Was it just desire? What was the action? The action was not love. We choose to love. No matter how much we may think we are loving, if we are in fact not loving, it is because we have chosen not to love and therefore do not love despite our good intentions. Love is what love does. Love is what love does. And going back to what we talked about earlier about depression, isn't that the same thing? Isn't depression is what it does? Think of it in the terms of love. I could be horribly depressed and I could choose to read a book to my kid. And I could choose to hug my wife. And I could choose to be nice to the person in the checkout lane at Kroger's. Nothing about my depression automatically keeps me from doing that. And I could do all of those. And then if you do that repeatedly over time, is who I am, are my actions depressed? Are my actions somebody who doesn't love? Or are my actions of someone who loves, regardless of how I feel? Love is as love does. Now, when we are depressed, we begin to feel like we're hopeless. And, I hear this a lot, man. I had a group just a few months ago and there was somebody in there and they were like, this isn't just going to be another one of those, just, tell me to pick myself up by the bootstraps and, everything will be better. And I listened to them and I kind of, thought internally, I'm like, yeah, it kind of is. It's kind of what it is. Now, I've thought about that a lot since then. And I thought about that a lot when I was reading this. And what was the person who delivered the message to that man in the first place? What were they probably not doing? Because all they heard was, it's your fault that you're in the position that you're in, and you need to change something. And if you don't, you're not going to get better. And so he's sitting there going, are you paying attention to me, man? Like, I got no money. I'm in and out of being homeless. Really? What's missing? And this is what's missing. See, trying to help somebody, trying to give somebody advice without love comes across as the opposite of love. Anyone can talk, just like anyone can have a feeling. Think back to when you were young, maybe now that you're not young, who knows? And think of like a friend you had that was always falling in love. One feeling to the next. Never took action. Never, worked on a relationship. It was just one to the next. Were they ever really happy? Not only that, I bet they had a lot of excuses about why I don't like Sally or I don't like Joe. But they had a bunch of excuses, okay? And they didn't want to hear it was their fault. Just like this man that I was talking to a couple months ago. But what if you came to them with love and you said first to this young man or this young woman or old man and old woman or whatever, before you told them what's true, we're responsible for our choices. I just pontificated about it a minute or two ago. But instead of just talking, I love them. And what is love? Love is as love does. And I spent time with them. And I had lunch with them. And instead of preaching to them and giving them advice, I talked to them about the football game last night. And I asked them questions about their life and where they had been. And I showed that I was willing to invest time in them, the kind of things you will do for somebody you love. And you can love somebody. It doesn't have to be romantic, just like Dr. Peck was talking about. There's lots of ways to love somebody. But I promise you this, they might not call it this, but you spend the time to be connected with another human being and listen to them and talk to them and be friendly to them and be open to them. It's going to get interpreted as one type of that love. Okay, they may not say, I love you, but that's the impact that it's going to have. And then, after, through my actions, I have loved this person in whatever way is appropriate. And then they're listening to me and the guard's going down. And they're like, what do I do to get out of this mess I in? Then, as someone who loves them, you can begin to say to them, well, man, here's what you should do. And they're not going to take it as, why don't you pick yourself up? What's your problem? Why do you make such bad? No, they're going to take it as you're someone that loves them. You're giving them good advice. And if they take that advice, their life may change. And then maybe they just do one of those things that you asked them to do, that they're taking responsibility for, that they're showing their actions for, that they're beginning to learn. Love is as love does. Depression is as depression does. You As Forrest Gump might say, stupid is as stupid does. Okay? And then moment by moment, they are learning that who they are those choices they make, and they have way more choices that they can make. And then they're going to come to you for more advice and more things they could do because you love them. And it also starts with ourselves. We got to love ourselves. That's a hard one. It's hard to love others if we don't love ourselves. If we don't have the same grace with ourselves, doing things for ourselves. You don't love yourself by putting poison in your body. You don't love yourself by not exercising. You don't love yourself by not going for walks. To truly be able to do the other the most effectively, you got to do the first. And, especially, as I've gotten older, I see friends that have gotten older, acquaintances, other people. I think what happens a lot, people quit loving themselves. They quit doing things for themselves. A result of that is they don't truly love others with their actions. They love them with their words or their emotions, or they just don't love them at all, don't even try. And they just get closed off. They're not going to change, and they're not going to help somebody else change. And the problem, or I should say the solution for all of that, is love. So here's my challenge for you today with somebody, okay? Go love somebody. And remember, love is what love does. I can love the person at the checkout counter by being nice to him and smiling at him. I can love an old friend by calling him up and talking to him. I can love, my partner, my wife, my husband, whomever, by just going home and giving them a hug and going, how was your day? Just do some love. Because here's what you're going to find. It's not just going to change them, it's going to change you if you need it yourself. So, one of the steps, one of the concepts you need to understand to go from depressed to a new life, seeing the world in a different way, you got to learn to love. And to do that, you need to understand that love is way more than an emotion. Love is an action. And it is something you can do, by the way, no matter how you feel. You can be having a bad day. You can feel unloved. You can feel depressed. And you can still love somebody. So I'm thinking of I can't remember the title of the song. I'm thinking of some 90s alternative song I liked. And there's this lyric, go love someone. Well, go love someone, my friends. I'm Silouan. It's great to be with you. Share this with your friends, anyone that thinks you might need it. And I'm out. Peace.